music. And
yeah, me too. I got a set of Klipsch speakers just for that.
and of course, wonderful stuff. Yeah.
You guys are audiophiles.
Well, I honestly, I have like a 20-year-old Yamaha amp, and I've had no reason whatsoever to replace it. It's great. Yamaha does great stuff.
The serious audiophiles, John, will go with, tube setups and really elaborate stuff.
Oh, yeah. Macintosh.
And yeah, I was going to say a Macintosh receiver with the tubes.
Or, some of that
like
exotic
15,000
stuff from China with the Russian tubes and with speaker cables that cost, $2,000 each. And it's pretty, they get very serious about it.
I've been in 2 recording studios and was blown away at how good the quality of the sound was. I'm not an audiophile, but even I could hear the difference.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've lost a lot of my dynamic range in my own speakers, my own inputs here. So
did you blow them out?
No, I didn't. I don't think I blew them out. Just time takes its toll, So
what?
I actually have
what?
Yeah, that's what my kids are always saying. They think I'm deaf.
I'm sure that more than once or twice you turned it to 11.
Well, they complain I play it too loudly, but it doesn't seem that way to me. So, yeah, I turned it to 11. What was that show where they turn it to 11?
Spinal Tap.
It's the movie Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole 211 thing also has something where you can turn something to 11 on, might be the audio or something.
No, the sound system goes up to 11.
Does it? Yeah. You know what else does is I get Pete's coffee, which is really good coffee, and I get like the espresso. And the dark used to be on a 10 scale. Now it goes to 11. So when I ordered some from Amazon recently, there was a thing with 11 on it. I'm like, yeah, okay, they're on it now.
So, David, one thing I do like also with the speakers, I have really good headphones, which, when you put them on, it becomes so immersive. The music gets in your head. They're Sennheisers, and I'm really glad I've had them a long time, but it's an amazing experience.
What kind of music do you listen to?
Mostly classical music. My favorites are like Bruckner or Sibelius or a lot of different chamber music, but a wide range of 600 years of.
I still love how Bose will pay for any non-amplified concert that any of its engineers want to go to. And
really?
Yeah, and this has been a policy that goes back to the very beginning. Old Man Bose, or whatever his name was, said he really wanted his people to hear, unamplified music so that they could bring that hearing sense to their work. And to this day, you can go to any unplugged concert and they'll reimburse you.
Will they reimburse you for opera, which is always unamplified?
Yeah, I think they would. That's the stipulation. It cannot be amplified.
And did you go on the Chevy event in Asheville where we got to go through the Moog factory?
Yeah, I was on that.
Moog keyboards. That was pretty cool.
That'd be pretty cool. Yeah,
it was interesting. I was surprised at how low tech it was, though.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I thought
the guys screwing together keyboards and
on workbenches,
electronically. Yeah. Well, that's what GM's doing with the ventilators in Kokomo. It's not an automated assembly line like it's people on workbenches,
right?
Electronic devices. It's hard to automate that stuff. I mean, some of it is they had more time, but you're talking about tiny screws.
Okay. Hey, I got to interrupt. Katie's ready to start the show here.
All right.
This is Autoline After Hours with John McElroy and Gary Vasilash, episode 503 for April 2nd of 2020. A Tesla skeptic lays it on the bottom line.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. And by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Mr. Gary Vasilash, how you doing in the duration of the quarantine here?
Yes, here we are. But it's a sunny day outside, but we're inside, and so all's good. And here's a fun fact for today, because there's always something going on in this world. In 1987, Congress passed a law which allowed the speed limit to go from 55 to 65. So for all those who remember those days of not being able to drive 55, today was the day in 1987 where it changed.
Man, we should be popping the champagne corks.
You know it.
Right. Hey, we've got to let everybody know, too, that David Welch from Bloomberg News is joining us on the show today. David, great to see you.
How's it going, everybody? Great to be here. Great to be here as opposed to the studio. I think I'd rather be in the studio, though.
Yeah, when this is all over, we'll have you back in the studio. But this is what we're dealing with for now. And we got to let everyone know our special guest today. We've got Montana Skeptic, guy who writes for Seeking Alpha. He's been writing for years. And Montana, welcome to the program.
John and Gary, thank you. It's my great pleasure. It's a pleasure to meet David Welch virtually, albeit. And thanks also to Katie and Cameron, who behind the scenes got me set up so spectacularly well.
Yeah, good stuff. So let me start off the whole conversation here, Montana. Number one, I'm intrigued by your handle, Montana Skeptic. And you've been kind of critical of Tesla from the beginning, mainly from the standpoint of how they present their financial earnings. Why don't you fill in some of the blanks there?
Sure. Well, my home that I own, that I love, is in Montana. So the name Montana Skeptic, I guess, came from that. I've been, I started my looking at Tesla, looking at its financial statements and its business model. And my criticism of Tesla really fundamentally was that it is I think, a flawed business model. And I was also disturbed, let's say, by some very aggressive accounting, some opacity in the financial statements. And so that's what my main focus has been regarding Tesla, is taking a look at its financials, taking a look at the promises and projections that it makes and how it actually performs on those. And that's been I've doubted that it could ever turn a profit. It's lost money for all 17 of its years in existence, all 9 years as a public company. It lost another $862 million last year. And I just don't see how it ever achieves a business going enterprise that can justify the really sort of stratospheric share price that it has. So we can talk about all that or none of that.
Well, can you talk about the business model? I mean, so you say it's a flawed business model. So describe what it is and what it perhaps ought to be.
Okay, well, first of all, it's heavily dependent on subsidies. Okay, if you add up all the subsidies Tesla has received directly and indirectly, including the indirect ones, federal income tax credits, the ZEV credits, the regulatory payments made by others, for example, the $960 million New York spent on its factory, the $1.3 billion that Nevada offered in its subsidy package, the tax abatements it received in California that it continues to receive in Nevada, the rebates that various states offer, or tax credits for state income tax rather than federal income tax credits, offer to buyers of Tesla cars. You're north of probably $7 billion. And that doesn't even count the hidden tax on people who buy internal combustion cars, okay, because they have to pay more for their car because the regulatory credits are flowing to Tesla. So you'd say, well, with all that, have they made money? And the answer is no. Since going public, they've lost more than $6 billion. And I don't see how this company can ever be profitable without subsidies. It certainly hasn't been with subsidies. The federal income tax credit's gone away here. And now it faces something that it's never faced before, especially in 2020. And that is just an onslaught of competition. The EV makers in Europe held back. They had incentives to hold back until January 1 of 2020 because of the way the European Union regulatory emission standards works. And that's no longer happening. I mean, if you look at 2019, okay, Tesla increased its revenues by $3 billion, right? And it ran Fremont full out all year long. And it had to slash prices on its 2 highest margin cars. And then it finished burning through an order book that it had spent 4 years building on the Model 3. And you get to the end of all that, and you had a total of $27 million extra gross margin and a loss, as I said, of $862 million. So it's like, I did all these things and all I get is that crummy t-shirt. And that's as good as it gets, because now this year, Tesla doesn't have Europe to itself anymore. It's really facing intense competition from so many people, besides Audi and Jaguar, BMW, Polestar, Volvo, Volkswagen. They're all introducing EVs over there this year. And because of those European incentives and the regulatory system, those people can sell their car, the EVs, and lose $20,000 per car, and it still makes sense for them to do it. Tesla can't afford to lose on the car. The other ones do it so they can sell their more profitable, cars that consumers actually more want to buy. So that's a terrible position for Tesla to be in. That's why I say that's among the reasons that it appears to me to be structurally unprofitable.
Well, go ahead,
David. It's a fair case. And I'm not saying you're wrong.
Tell me what facts I got wrong.
I'm not saying you have facts wrong. What I'm telling you, so, look, well, for one, the bears have lost, right? Up until coronavirus, they got killed. The shorts got killed betting against Tesla and against Elon Musk. Now, what are the Tesla fans? And by fans, I'm not talking about the guys online who love their Tesla cars and worship Elon Musk and get out the pom-poms on a routine basis. I'm talking about the people who put their money down and have done very well in the stock because they believe that this company has something unique. What does Musk have? And you've driven the Model Y, and you've probably been in all of his vehicles. It's a good car, okay? He has a good product. Not perfect, but it's a good product. Hold on. Yeah, we let you.
I'm sorry.
And I'm not defending him, but let's if we're gonna about both sides of the thing. And like I said, before this, I said we at Bloomberg, we're the umpire, right? And so our Tesla reporter Dana Hull gets stick from the Tesla fans and from the shorts, and so that says she's doing a good job. But what's the case for buying up this stock? Yeah, there's a lot of competition, but it only makes electric vehicles. So if you buy the theory that electric cars are going to be in hot demand and we're going to see massive growth just in electric vehicles, Tesla's got good product. They already have a full lineup out there. Well, not full lineup, but they have a bigger lineup than everybody else out there, and they've got a great brand, a ridiculously good brand, probably the most beloved brand in the auto business right now. I would challenge someone to knock that down. And so they can, in the eyes of their long investors, they can get the growth because they have all of that going for them. And heretofore, the competition that's gone up against them has gotten killed. Chevy Bolt's a nice car, sells in small numbers, and Tesla sells in huge numbers in every market they've gone into. Very popular stuff. They make money doing this, but that's been the big challenge for these guys. I think they've gotten costs down, but even the quarters where they have profit, the quality of earnings hasn't been terrific. Sometimes it's EV credits that gives them money. Sometimes it's freeing up reserve funds that adds the income statement. So, I think they're legitimately profitable in those quarters, and they've generated positive cash flow, but it's not an awesome business. Where does someone make money selling EVs going forward? This is where the science comes in, and Tesla has good battery packs. They have good electric motors. GM talked about this on their electrification day. 65% of the cost of a battery is minerals, right? So you're in the commodities market. GM's talking about, very low cobalt, very low nickel batteries, get the expensive stuff out of the battery and start to make these vehicles more profitable. It's going to need to happen over time, and Tesla's going to need to ride that curve down in order to a huge volume that they theoretically will get to be profitable. But so how does this company make money, Montana? That things change within the dynamics of making electric and selling electric vehicles that make it a real business. On a linear path, no way. But if they can get scale for the stuff that like steel that goes into any old car, yeah, they're going to do better there. If the cost of batteries comes down because of changes in the composition of the elements involved, so that you're spending less on that, they can make money there as well. Because there are a lot of slips, between cup and lip on this, but that's that's the bull case for the company.
That's all you got. So listen, my view is this: the share price has nothing.
I don't own the shares. I don't got nothing.
Right. No, the share price has nothing to do with the fundamentals. Okay. The share price is it is
the share price is a bet on future fundamentals.
Sure, and David, you've seen it go down to 170 and up to 960. The share price is enormously volatile. Just in the last, year and a half, it's enormously volatile. How can you say that you know what the value of the company is when one day it's at 170 and a few months later it's at 960? Come on, okay.
Clearly, look, it doesn't trade on the value.
Number two, no, it doesn't. It trades on Elon Musk's latest tweets, okay. But free cash flow, sure. If you spend nothing on capex, you can have free cash flow. If you use capital leasing, which is what Tesla does, and you don't count that, it inflates the apparent free cash flow. They have. The fact is that year after year they're unprofitable, and you're going to see the opposite of free cash flow this quarter. Obviously, even though Tesla ran Fremont full tilt up until a week ago, and in the last week, those cars don't get delivered in that quarter anyway.
But isn't it interesting that they're running the plant full out because people basically want to buy the cars, which is I think what David was saying.
Sure, but they're going to end up with 30,000 cars in inventory, John. Gary, they can't sell the cars. They look at the Model Y. Okay, I heard David Welch and Sandy Munro say, "Oh, people are going to want this car." Well, Elon Musk would never let us see what the order book was on the Model Y, and now we have a clue why. Because Tesla has started. First of all, there's a report like in Electric, which is a Tesla fanzine, saying, hey, there's a lot of cancellations. People are canceling. And now people are getting emails saying, the rear wheel drive car you ordered, we're ready to fill your order on that now. Well, Tesla had earlier said, all we're going to do is all wheel drive performance and long range all wheel drive cars. 2,000, 3,000 cars later, they're out of orders. Okay. Because they just don't have demand for that car. The people that really wanted this Tesla bought the Model 3, and the people that are going to buy the Model Y won't be buying the Model 3. Now, how do you explain that you burned through your performance and all-wheel drive order book on the Model Y in a matter of weeks if everybody wants this car? It's just, you're imagining demand that's not there. And it's not just coronavirus. Look at Norway. Norway has a regime that absolutely favors electric vehicles, has forever, and punishes the taxes on internal combustion vehicles. For 5 straight quarters, Tesla's absolute numbers have been dropping off there. And this quarter, lowest ever. And the Audi e-tron alone outsold the Model 3, the Model S, and the Model X. Okay, that's not coronavirus. That's competition. And in terms of this great brand, Tesla last year actually cut its SG&A. It cut its service, general, administrative. People are waiting forever to get a service appointment. They amputated their service. People have complained bitterly about it. You have to wait a long time to get your car serviced. And you can destroy a brand. It's nice. They do have a beautiful brand, but they're destroying. There's a lot more discontent if you read the forum boards with the way Tesla is treating its customers. And that's certainly true in Europe. There's just no way to explain how this works if its brand is so wonderful, why is it getting killed in Europe?
Well, here's what I want to ask you about, Montana. No doubt about it. Tesla's never put together a profitable year. Last year, they lost a lot of money in the first half of the year. They had 2 profitable quarters after that. I thought 2020 was going to be the year where they turned the corner and actually produced a profitable year, especially with the plant coming on in China. They're building the one in Germany. That probably won't do anything for the books until next year. Of course, everything I'm talking about is before the coronavirus hit. But didn't you think with Q3, Q4 of last year, the China plant coming on, that they really had a shot at starting to turn the corner and make a profit this year?
No, I didn't. I was convinced they were going to lose money this year before this happened. It's going to be worse than I thought. It's going to be more than $1 billion loss this year. Mark my words, it's going to be.
But that's probably true of every automaker this year.
Yeah, every automaker is going to get hurt this year. But Tesla, those profits, if you look at Q3, for example, let's look at their profit in Q3. They got some rebates from some of their vendors, okay? And in exchange for that, they had to say, we will make a volume commitment to you. So now Tesla is in a bad position where it's got to buy a lot of parts and it can't build the cars, and the ones it's building it can't sell. That's a hell of a bad position to be in. Tesla has done this repeatedly. It made fleet deals to achieve these profits, okay? Where it offered really absurd residual value guarantees to the people who were buying the cars, okay? So sure, you can sell cars and you can make the numbers look good, but look at the RVG number. Look at the reserve you've got on that. Is it realistic? Those chickens come home to roost once your growth stops. And there's a lot of chickens like that Tesla has that are going to come home to roost. You can hide a lot of this stuff with aggressive accounting if your growth is growing. But when the growth slows down or stops, it's going to get ugly on the financial statements.
Well, Antenna, what you're saying is that they can't sell the Model Y, nobody wants it, which is just as impossible to prove at this moment today as Elon's case that he's going to sell more Model Ys than he did with the other vehicle. I mean,
David, why are they now soliciting orders?
You're right. If he doesn't sell the Model Y, he's doomed. If General Motors doesn't sell the Cadillac EV, if they don't sell the Hummer EV, they've got a serious problem on their hands with a lot of investment that hasn't gone. One thing I will agree with, I think Elon's going to have a very difficult time in Europe, particularly Germany, because of the EVs coming from those automakers, and because Germany specifically is an extremely nationalistic market. Opel failed under GM ownership to a significant degree because even though it was German, even though Germans engineered the cars, and Germans worked in the plants, it was owned by a bunch of Americans who managed the company from Zurich, Switzerland, and the Germans just hated the company. But I think once there are other options besides a Tesla, and there already are, and there will be even more, he's going to have a tough time. But the U.S. and China, the Chinese like American brands, and they wanted Tesla to be over there. I think he'll do well there. I think in the U.S. he's got a lot of growth. The real question for Tesla, for the company itself and for investors is how quickly do Americans want to embrace EVs, particularly those that are very expensive, because the car Danny Monroe had was stickered at, I think, 64, wasn't it? Yeah, how many people are out there who can buy $50,000, $60,000 cars, electric or not? Particularly if we get into a recession because of the coronavirus. So they're fundamental questions for all companies, but they are more acute for Tesla because of the cash position they have. They can't just go out and draw down a credit line of $16 billion like GM did and similar to what Ford did. So there are real questions for the company in an environment like this, and if they don't get the growth. But that was sort of already known. To really be a bull, on Tesla, you have to believe that there's going to be growth in the total EV car park and EV demand, and that Tesla's going to get an outsized chunk of it versus that competition, all of which is kind of unknowable.
If we look at the sales last year, let's look at what happened in 2019 rather than this uncertainty that coronavirus is having. So General Motors sold 16,418 Bolt EVs. Okay. Tesla sold 158,925 Model 3s. I mean, it's an insane difference. So this gets back to David's point about the brand has some real serious value if there is nearly 10 times as many Model 3 sold as bolts.
Yeah. So what's the EV that becomes to iPhone what the Samsung Galaxy 5 with Android was to Apple? Because they did unseat for I think a year or two. iPhone is the best-selling phone, and then it became sort of a neck-and-neck real competition. But before that, Apple had kind of brought BlackBerry to its knees in terms of sales. The iPhone was the thing to have, and you really had to have a great product with some serious marketing behind it in order to compete. That may be coming with GM's very serious about this. Volkswagen Group, let's call it, very serious about this. Porsche's got stuff out. Tesla won't have this they're running anymore, but people don't necessarily put a Cadillac or Volkswagen or Audi dealerships looking for EVs. That's all they go to the Tesla website looking for.
That's changing,
David. One sec, guys. We got to take a quick break right now, a quick commercial break. We're going to give a shout out to our good friends at Bridgestone. All right, we're back talking all things automotive with Montana Skeptic. And Montana, you were about to join in on something that David was just talking about.
Look, first, Gary made a good point. The Bolt is not a Tesla killer, but the competition is coming. And obviously, we see it first in Europe. That's where the automakers are incentivized to deliver their EVs. And you've got a host of really compelling offerings that are starting to hit over there, including the Mercedes EQC has started to deliver. The Audi, as I said, is outselling all three Tesla cars combined in some of those markets. Okay. And I don't know if you've driven an Audi, I'm sure, David, that's a gorgeous car, the Audi e-tron. You have here in the state, well, the VW ID4, the Audi Q4 e-tron, those are coming also. It's going to be in the Porsche Taycan. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Okay, there's not going to be an Apple versus BlackBerry where one emerges as the leader. There are going to be many compelling EV offerings. They're all going to cut into Tesla's market share. It's already happening. And the other automakers also have a line of cars that are not EVs. And so as much as they have to take a hit on their EVs, and they're incentivized to by these crazy regulatory schemes, they can still make a profit or recover some of the loss in a tough year like this. And Tesla, unfortunately, does not have that position.
So to go to David's point when he was making the Apple Samsung comparison, I often think in terms of, if you look at the PC market, that you had Dell and you had IBM and you had Compaq and you had et cetera, right? And then you had Apple. And so you looked at spreadsheets, and you could buy a PC that just blew the doors off of the Apple, yet the Apple faithful said, you know what? We're going to buy an Apple. We're going to buy a Mac. How's Dell doing? What happened to Gateway? Where's Compaq? What about HP? I mean, Isn't there the possibility that despite all of this competition coming from Audi and Mercedes and Porsche and Volkswagen, that there'll still be people who are going to say, you know what, Tesla or nothing?
No doubt about that. But that pool is not so deep as you think. I mean, you see these people who own Teslas, they own 1, 2, 3 Tesla cars, okay? Tesla needs to broaden its market base. And with the cars priced as high as they are, that's going to be tough to do. And, right now, let's say you want to go buy, let's say you're not a Tesla devotee, okay? There's another word for it. But, and you want to go buy a car, and you read David Welch's story. Well, they're offering that price for the Model Y, $53,000. Well, add in the delivery charge and the non-refundable fee to order the car.
Actually, my story said $64,000. But go on with your story.
The story said $52,900. I thought.
Well, what David's talking about is the high performance version. That was $64,000.
Let's just do. The one that Sandy had stickered was $64,000.
Well, right. He had red paint, that cost more. He had nicer tire wheels, that cost more.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. That was my point 5 minutes ago. What's the market for $64,000 cars?
But let's say you want the e-tron. Well, you can go, yes, the e-tron costs like $74,000. They're knocking $10,000 off the price of that in the US right now. Just walk in the door. And then you get a $7,500 tax credit that Tesla doesn't get anymore. And guess what? Suddenly the car's cost the same. And I'll tell you what, having been in an e-tron and having been in various Teslas, there's absolutely no comparison to the beauty of the interior of those cars. It's just, and the fit and finish, it's the Audi is a much, much better put together car than the Tesla. Yes, if you're a Tesla believer, you've got to have a Tesla. Okay, I understand. But let's see if there's enough believers. There don't appear to be in Europe. I guess they're going to be from the United States and China, right? Is what you're telling me?
Well, they sold a grand total of 746 Audi e-trons in December of last year.
In the
746
US.
In the US. So, really? I mean,
Yeah,
I've driven the car.
Audi,
it's a great car. I love the car. I mean, it's a beautiful
but
car.
Montana makes a good point. The latest sales numbers in Europe for the first quarter show Tesla getting killed by cars like the e-tron. It's really come on strong. But Montana, while I would agree with you that the interior of an Audi is way better than any of the Teslas, that to me, that's the one downfall of Tesla. You can see where they cheapen things. They've got the fake wood trim and stuff like that.
It's almost too Spartan, John. Like, so you were in the Model Y yesterday. I was looking for something way nicer.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about quality of materials. Tesla does it on the cheap when it comes to the interior. But I think what motivates people to buy Teslas is not that. What they're wowed by is the longer range that they are able to get, the faster charging times that they're able to get, the over-the-air updates that Audi doesn't offer to any near degree that Tesla does. There's other aspects of the vehicle that I think really appeals to people who are buying Teslas. They appeal to me, by the way. I think the exterior of the e-tron is going to look really dated in a couple of years because of that big radiator grill that they've stuck on the front of it. But I'm just making a point here. Montana, what I also wanted to ask you about is I completely agree with your criticisms, but the stock price has gone way up. Other analysts have called this thing. I mean, ARK, I think it's ARK Investment, absolutely has called this thing all along. Adam Jonas at Morgan Stanley has been very bullish on the company and all. They're looking to the future and what it can do. And I'd love to get your feedback on it, especially when it comes to FSD, full self-driving, which everybody thinks could unlock a tremendous amount of value in this company. But I'd love to get your take on that.
Sure. Well, I think as you remember, Elon Musk said we were going to have 1 million robo-taxis this year. Okay. There won't be a single robo-taxi this year. And the reason I really believe Tesla has grossly overpromised and misled people by calling it autopilot. It's not ready for prime time. I drive a car, by the way, that has, it can park itself for you. If you get into a tight spot, it'll reverse all the vectors to get you right out again. It will control the distance and speed on the highway, and it will drive itself. Okay. Now you have to have your eyes focused ahead because it has a camera watching your eyes, which Tesla doesn't. Okay. It's easy to game it. Other automakers have very sophisticated assisted driving. They just don't call them autopilot, and they don't market it that way, and they don't let people use it and be able to take fall asleep in the car. You see those films. Tesla has promised something here with full self-driving that it can't deliver. And you see them kind of walking the promise back and saying, well, it won't be perfect and it won't work all the time and you'll have to pay attention, but we're going to go ahead and recognize the revenue anyway on all this deferred revenue we have for full self-driving. If you talk to experts in the autonomous driving field, I don't know, have you had Sam Abwelsamid on from Navigant Research?
Oh, yeah, numerous times.
He will tell you, ask him, there's a lot of people who play in this field, and he views Tesla as a distant second to last place right now. And he also will tell you, a lot of these experts will tell, I'm not an expert, but without LiDAR, you're not going to have full self-driving. Full self-driving is years away anyway, but you need LiDAR. Why? Because LiDAR gives you a precise read on distance and edges. For the cameras that Tesla has are low resolution, number one. Number two, to process what that object ahead of you is doing, where it's going to move next, you need several seconds of data that have to be processed and kept in the cache simultaneously. That's a huge amount of computing required for that. The people who've looked at this said, look, the Tesla's approach to this is never going to work. And, it's been overpromised and overhyped in my view. And, Kathy Wood at ARC premises a lot of her valuation, which honestly, I've looked at their model and there are so many problems with it, but she premises it on the idea that they're going to be this robo-taxi company. Elon Musk swore, look, don't look at our financials. Don't look at our bottom line and gross margin. Don't worry about that stuff. He was telling the analysts last year before they raised money. View us as a robo-taxi company because people are going to buy this car and it's going to appreciate in value. It's going to be worth 3-4 times more than when you bought it, because while you're sleeping, your car can be out there performing as a robo-taxi, which in the age of coronavirus doesn't sound too wonderful, does it? But regardless of that, it's a ridiculous promise. It's not going to happen. People's valuation listen, right now, already Tesla trades at 20 times the price to value. If you do the metrics, right, it's 20 times what its competitors do, right? I mean, price to revenue, it's crazy. If you do price, a PE ratio, it's infinite because Tesla has nothing but losses. There's just no way to achieve the valuation that the stock is trading at without parabolic perfection for 2 decades to come. And it ignores how many really good competitors are here. It overstates Tesla's capacity with autopilot and full self-driving. The beautiful thing about full self-driving is it's $7,000 of pure margin. I see that, but none of these people, you saw when they introduced Auto Summit last year, it was like some drunk guy staggering across the parking lot to get your car to come to you. It was embarrassing, but they wanted to recognize the revenue, so they did it. And that's Tesla. That's Tesla accounting.
Well, I know you and others have been critical of Tesla. I have been very skeptical myself from a business model standpoint. I love the cars. I'm telling you, that high-performance Model 3 may be the best sedan I've ever driven in my life. I love the thing. But I've been very skeptical of the company's business model, like yourself. And yet, sales have been going up every year. The stock price has been growing. Their financials have gotten better, even though they're losing money. They're not losing as much. Don't you see any hope for this thing at all?
No. Okay. Look, John, they delivered cars right up to the end in Q1. Okay. They were delivering touchlessly. They had very little shutdown time in China, as you remember. And we haven't heard what their delivery number is yet. Okay. I think they were like 110,000 in Q4. They're going to be, if it's 85,000 in Q1, that's going to be a great result. Okay. It could be considerably less. And it's not a good sign that their Model Y order book has dried up that quickly. And man, that was quick. And people are going to realize, I think in a way, COVID it's terrible for everybody, and it's going to disguise the problem that Tesla has.
Don't you think the Model Y, the dry up, as you call it, there's only anecdotal evidence to that, right? I mean, the Norway, the Netherlands, the Spanish numbers and the like.
Tesla started emailing its customers and said, who'd ordered the rear wheel drive car, and said, we're now ready to deliver. We announced earlier it was only going to be all-wheel drive and all-wheel drive performance versions. But 2 weeks later, they maybe made 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 Model Ys, and now they're saying, hey, electric, which is as I said, a very pro-Tesla publication, said there's lots of reports of people canceling their orders. Remember, Elon Musk was asked, what is your order book on the Model Y? He boasted about it constantly for the Model 3. We got hourly updates. We're at 177,000. We're at 256,000. We're at 312. We're at 444. And, people just ate that up. But he became very shy and bashful about the Model Y. He wouldn't answer questions during the conference calls about what the order book was. And now we know why. It's pathetically puny. It's tiny. They're already resorting to low margin cars. You don't do that if your order book is strong.
So how many orders are there?
If I had to guess, there were 5,000 or fewer for the all-wheel drive versions of the Model Y in the United States. That's what it looks like to me. How do I know that? Because Tesla's delivered maybe 2,000 or 3,000, and it's already soliciting orders for the rear-wheel drive.
Well,
Clear.
they just started.
You ask them. Why don't you ask them, David? You're the correspondent. They don't pay any attention to me. Elon Musk.
They don't return our calls either, actually. But,
well, then.
No, look, Montana, look, they just started building it. And I'm not saying this is as hot as the Model.
Good story, don't they? We hear all about the good stories. Come on. If Tesla really had a story to tell here, you'd be hearing it.
They don't return our calls.
All right, David, did the car go into production in January, the Model Y, David?
I think it's more recent than that. I think they really just started getting it like February, early March is when they started to actually build.
Went into production in March.
Yeah. So look,
like March 13th, by the way.
Other car companies have hot cars with no order bank whatsoever, right? So like every other company we cover, not have this backlog. Like Tesla actually has people pre-ordering them, but nobody else really doesn't, unless it's a rarity, right? Like you did see this with Corvette, with the mid-engine car, like specialty cars, yes. So look, I don't know that this thing is going to sell great. It doesn't seem to have the buzz the Model 3 did when it first came out, certainly, but that doesn't mean the car won't sell. And I don't know that it will or won't either. That's the gamble you take when you buy the stock. As I said early on, you're betting two things. One, that take on EVs is going to grow massively in the next few years, and that Tesla will keep, even if they have smaller share of that market, if they go from, like 95% of the EVs sold in the US are Teslas or more, right? Or 97% or something. So if the EV market booms, Tesla goes from 97% of that to 77% of that, they're still selling a lot of cars. And that's what they need to do. The market share number, as the conventional auto companies have learned the hard way over the years, the market share number doesn't necessarily mean all that much if you're now making money. And that's what the Tesla long holders are betting, is that even if they have smaller share, the market's going to be so much bigger. They'll get a big stake of it because of the brand, because of the over-the-air updates, the better range, all these things John was talking about earlier, and those are serious advantages. They'll still get to a scale where they can make money. I'm not sure about the making money part on a consistent basis. I'm not sure about the cash part either. There are a lot of holes in their game because they still have to get volume way up. They still have to get costs way down, and they do rely on great pricing on their cars. The Model 3 never got below really $40,000. It's sort of like the old days. The BMW 3 Series would advertise was a $35,000 car. You couldn't find anyone anywhere in U.S. inventory that was below like $42,000. And Tesla's an extreme version of that pricing. And again, what's the market for electric cars that are priced, let's say, north of 50 generously? I think they'll get a big chunk of that, right? I think they're going to be the kingpin in that market. How big is it, particularly if the economy goes into a swoon, particularly as the stock market goes into a swoon over this virus, and whatever the economy looks like on the other side of coronavirus? These are all huge questions for Tesla, and it's more sensitive to them because they're more, they're called more precarious balance sheet and financial position than the established companies.
So, David, we have some examples, right? Recent ones. The Netherlands, Denmark, Hong Kong, the state of Georgia. What happens every time incentives and subsidies get taken away? What happens to EV demand when when the subsidies go away? You see
look, it makes it tougher, but I also don't think people buying $65,000 cars are all that sensitive to those subsidies.
How do you explain Denmark? Tesla went from way up here to just about nothing. Same in Hong Kong. In the Netherlands,
those are very big. Look, this I will give you, okay? And I'll even drop to my knees and give you this, Montana. If Tesla was betting on the Netherlands for their future, you're right. They fail, and they fail tomorrow. But nobody other than maybe a bicycle maker in the Netherlands is betting his future on the Netherlands, okay? They're betting their future on the Model Y selling in the United States and China. I think I told you before, they're going to have trouble in Europe because the European market is really France and Germany in terms of volume, right? I mean, Southern Europe, yes, but if you want to live and die and make money, it's France and Germany. I think they're going to have a really tough time in Germany.
How do you explain?
You've been there. It's a nationalistic market. California, dude. How many cars they sell in California? They're beloved on the West Coast.
It's a
probably
California
see a lot of them
company.
So look, they have to win this game. I don't know why you're arguing with me. I'm not a Tesla longholder. I don't work for the company. I'm giving the other side of it. I'm giving the other side of it because you're here with, extreme, I despise Tesla story. So I'm just telling viewers, okay,
I don't
here's
listen.
the balance to it.
I think
yes, you despise that. Look, come on,
I think
man,
the Model S is a terrific car. It's really it's the best car they ever built. I'm not as fond of the Model 3 or the Model Y, and the Model X is so complicated and problematic. But the Model S, that is a stunningly beautiful, wonderful car, revolutionary, a big achievement. I grant you that, but we're not talking about the car. We're talking about the business model. In China, by the way, EV demand declined in 2019. People had all these predictions about this.
And for everything declined in 2019.
Well,
I mean,
China's overrun with EV
the entire
makers.
auto market has been in retreat for almost 2 years in China. I mean,
so what's the case for building a factory in Germany right now?
I think they're going to have a tough time with that. I really do. It's a build it and they will come business model. And
you have to have a story all the time. That's what the case is. You must have a narrative. We are the growth company. We'll take down the forest and build our factory, and we'll worry about the rest of the stuff tomorrow. Now that we hear the Cybertruck is going to be redesigned, well, it was never designed in the first place, but this gives them an excuse to push it out a few more years. It was promised for this year, of course, which I didn't believe. And this is a company that always has a story and always has an excuse, but never performs, okay, on the bottom line. They never do, and they won't.
So what do you guys think about the model? Oh, go ahead, John.
Gary, we're going to come back to you, but first we got to give a shout out to our good sponsor, Borg Warner.
The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. No matter what the mode of transportation, there is always the need for an efficient propulsion system. And that's exactly what Borg Warner has been doing since the earliest days of the automotive industry. We create innovative mobility technologies that reduce energy consumption and emissions while improving performance. Our proven track record has made us an industry leader in forward-looking propulsion solutions for combustion, hybrid, and electric vehicles.
All right, we're back talking all things automotive with Montana Skeptic. And Gary, I cut you off. Now I'm opening up the mic for you.
Not a problem. So this goes to both Montana and David. Okay, so what will be the effect of the Ford Mustang Mach-E be on Tesla in, say, a market like California, David, where you said that, there's great love for all things with a T on it?
That's a good question. I do think it's one of those situations where they will get some buyers who may have gone for a Tesla. I do think the brands, Ford Mustang buyer versus a Tesla intender, I think a different psychographic buyer. I mean, a marketing expert can maybe explain that better. Look, Montana's point, I think any competition that comes in is going to take some share. It's just, even if they don't do that well, they're going to take some market share. I mean, look at General Motors in 62 when they had 52% of the U.S. market. And as the Germans and Japanese came in, even when they took very little market share to begin with, it was an erosion. So Tesla's life is going to get tougher as everybody else brings out real electric cars. Because look, the Nissan Leaf, not bad cars, but they are compact hatchbacks with shorter range. The Bolt is actually technologically a very good car, but what do Americans hate? Altogether now, compact hatchbacks. And that's Tesla's only competition heretofore was a compact hatchback. And so as real vehicles that are roomy, sporty, better to look at, nicer interior come out, that will be competition for Tesla. That's why I keep saying it's a function of how big the EV market is and how much it grows. That's true for General Motors too, by the way. They're coming out with all of these vehicles. Ford announced a lot of EVs coming as well. This is a lot of money. I think Alex Partners estimates $260 billion by 2023 or 24 being poured into electric vehicles. That's a lot of capital for a market that Elon, Mary Barra, you name the CEO, Jim Hackett doesn't know if the market's going to be there. I think you're going to see some money burned, and you'll probably see some vehicle programs delayed and canceled because I'm not sure the buyers are going to be there, particularly if you go into a big recession. So, this coronavirus, it may give Elon some cover, it may give a lot of people some cover. It's going to give a lot of people a lot of headaches because some of these great plans are going to be possibly derailed by it. But yeah, Mach-E, it could be competition. I'm not sure there's a lot of cross shopping in those brands at the moment, but yeah, it doesn't knock the Model Y out of contention by any means, but it takes some volume, no question about it.
What do you think, Montana?
I thought Ford did a really great job with the rollout of the Mach-E. That was an impressive presentation. And, I agree with David, TBD, let's watch and see. There is a Tesla slice of market that will buy nothing but Tesla. If it doesn't have that magic T on it, it won't touch it. And there are a lot of people who are excited about the Mach-E. Again, I think it's not a Tesla killer. It's just another one of those little slices that takes out a Tesla demand and another bit of pressure it puts on Tesla margins. There is this difference, okay? With the Ford Mach-E, you can get it serviced, okay? Ford has a traditional dealership network. Tesla said, we're going to be different. We're going to eschew the dealerships and we're going to have direct sales, and we'll own our service centers. And that's turned out to be, in my mind, a very problematic model for a lot of reasons, among which the service centers have an incentive to make sure it isn't called warranty and that you have to pay for it. Whereas the dealerships are always fighting for the people who buy the cars. Number one, they want to get the cars serviced fast. They want to make sure that the people who bring their car to get fixed or serviced can get through there quickly. Tesla says, I can get you in 3 weeks from now, 5 weeks from now. It may be that, with the Ford Mustang Mach-E, we'll see whether a traditional dealership model is superior to Tesla's revolutionary direct sales model.
One quick thing, one of my colleagues, while we're sitting here, said that the redesign of the Cybertruck is an April Fool's joke. So we'll see. I don't know. That's unconfirmed at the moment, but we can check.
Let me know.
Both of you just raised the point about what's going to happen as a result of coronavirus in terms of electric vehicles. So there was a call this morning, maybe David, you or John, you were on the call this morning with LMC Automotive, where they were talking about, one of the possible impacts of this is that companies, whether they're in Europe or in the United States, are going to pull back on some of their electric vehicle programs because survival is probably going to be a little bit more important to them than having an electric vehicle on the road. Do you guys put any credibility into that idea? And especially you, John, you obviously been looking at this very carefully.
Well, look, there's EV mandates. In Europe, you cannot meet emission standards without battery electric vehicles. You can't do it. China, you've got specific market share targets that you have to hit with EVs. With the California ZEV mandate, you have to have EVs. So unless those regulatory authorities are willing to back off on their deadlines, automakers are going to be legally obligated to fulfill that mandate. And I'd love to hear what you guys think, how that might go. Montana, what do you think? What is the natural demand for EVs out there?
Well, I think it's very small without mandates and subsidies. I think companies have been forced to make these cars. And at first they made lousy compliance cars. And now they are competing in earnest. The Dieselgate scandal no doubt prodded VW Group to do that even more in earnest. And there's a big question in my mind about whether this is a massive misallocation of capital, because the problem is that battery costs are still too high. We hear about these revolutions are going to happen. There's still about a $6,000 difference in cost that you just can't get rid of. Okay. And there's the improvements now in these batteries are at the margin. You need a revolutionary breakthrough, and we haven't had it. And when it comes, who knows? Someday, no doubt, but who knows? So people have been forced to make cars that consumers don't want, that cost more, that have to be subsidized. And so these companies have been pushed in. It's ironic because Tesla had the EV world to itself, and now these regulatory schemes have basically forced other OEMs to offer some pretty robust competition, which is finally arriving. Okay. I think listen, if EVs were saving the earth, that would be one thing. I think there's a far more compelling case to be made for hybrid cars in terms of overall cradle to grave emissions savings than EVs. But the political lobbying power was behind the battery electrics in a lot of places. The regulatory schemes are skewed so much in favor of them, including, the one that including the United States federal income tax credit, which is in effect for everyone but GM and Tesla, I think. The ship has sailed. I think they have to make EVs for the reasons you said, John, unless people with this coronavirus and the enormous economic destruction it is causing say, we can't afford to punish our enterprises like this. We have got to back off on some of these mandates, but everybody has already spent so much money now to design and build the EVs. I think they're going to build them, and it's going to be painful. But as you said, until those regulatory schemes are repealed, they have to build them and build a lot of them.
Look, that's true. I do think, I think EVs have captured the imagination of a lot of people, but there's still a lot of, the range issue is still a problem for a lot of people. You can't take a road trip in an EV unless you plan out your route accordingly so that you can get a charge in these cars. And for a lot of people, that's an issue. Look, the people on this webcast right now who research about, read about, write about, talk about electric cars and this whole microcosm all the time, and being an EV may not be a total stretch. The average consumer who doesn't see a charging station all over, see charging stations everywhere the way they see filling stations on every corner, don't necessarily do the research and say it's time for me to buy an EV. So there is a charging infrastructure and a marketing issue with electric cars that I think is going to hold off growth. There's an economic issue with it. There's still a price and cost issue. Forget about Tesla for a second. GM was saying on electrification day last month that they can get the cost down and make money on these without breaking the bank. It's going to have to happen, right? You're going to have, I think Mary Barra said, at least 300 miles of range. They can't be terribly expensive, and the company needs to make money, and they're saying they're going to be able to do all of that.
Yeah, but David, it's going to have to happen, but there's going to have to be a scientific breakthrough to get you there.
Well, it all depends on what price segment that you're going into. I maintain that if you're at $45,000 or more, you can make a profit on an electric car. When GM announces it's going to have its own battery pack or its own battery factory, when you look at the capability of what they can build in the Detroit Hamtramck plant, they could sell hundreds of thousands of EVs out of that plant. Not one of them is going to be under $45,000. Most of them are going to be in the $60,000 to $80,000 range. This is the problem. This is the problem that the industry faces. Yes, there are EVs out there that are priced under $45,000, and they all lose a ton of money. This is where I totally agree with what you're saying, Montana. The battery breakthrough hasn't come. Yes, costs are coming down, but I'll tell you, mass market manufacturers like Hyundai have told me they need the battery price to be at $80 per kilowatt hour, or they can't make a profit because of where they're competing in price with the Hyundai lineup. Right now, where are we? Probably $145. We're probably going to see the sell price get down to $100 in a couple of years. it's still not enough. It still leaves you with at least a $6,000 delta to an ICE powertrain. This is the issue. And I'm talking to I love EVs. I think driving an electric car is a better driving experience than with an internal combustion engine. But if I were an automaker that was being forced by law all around the world to sell these things in volume, my hair would be on fire, because I'm not sure how I can make enough volume if I've got to make money and I've got to price them over $45,000.
You know, if Tesla had just stopped with the Model S and X and said, we're going to be a high-end niche manufacturer, we're not going to lobby for all these mandates and subsidies and get behind all that stuff. We're going to sell expensive cars to rich people who want really good performance stuff. I think the company would have had a winning business model. But the idea that they were going to do a mass market car, which, as David pointed out, you never saw one for $35,000, okay? And that was dependent on a income tax credit of $7,500, which has shrunk to zero as of January 1. That's a very dubious business model. And you've now, because you've lobbied for all this subsidies and mandates and schemes, you've drawn all your competitors to come fight with you. And it's going to be awfully tough to last long in that ring. It's tough on everybody.
You know, to be fair, though, if we look at
go ahead, Gary.
I was going to say, you know, Montana, when you're talking about all of these credits and tax abatements and so on, you know, this is the traditional auto industry as well. I mean, you just look at, you know, the most famous example of this is, and I know that John and David will certainly remember this, when states were fighting over the opportunity to get the Saturn plant, right? And
I remember that.
You know, everybody's looking for the money. So I mean, this is not Tesla.
Gary, there's two different things here. Okay, it's one thing to say, by the way, these things hardly ever work out. I'm opposed to them in every industry that people do it. They just look at Wisconsin and Foxconn, for example.
Right.
But that's one kind of thing. That's what Nevada did with the Gigafactory. Okay, they created all these incentives to get the employment to come there. Okay, and whether that's worked out or not isn't a debatable question. But what I'm talking about are mandates where the government says you must have an average of no more than 95 grams of carbon dioxide per kilometer. And if you don't, we're going to penalize you. And you force automakers to make one kind of a car. Nobody's forcing you to make a particular anything when the states go and throw money at you, okay? Nobody said to Amazon, yeah, but you must sell only Amazon Prime in this manner, in this way. They just wanted Amazon to come up with the jobs. But when you start mandating your CO2 levels and say we're going to penalize you if you don't, and when you start making them pay indulgences to the California Air Resources Board with the ZEV credits, and then that's a whole different kind of thing from the subsidies that we've traditionally seen thrown at big companies in hopes of, you know, securing jobs.
So Montana, what's your outlook for Tesla and the EV market? And obviously the coronavirus has thrown everything up in the air. Who knows what's going to happen here? But if not for that, as you look out, what was your prospects for Tesla?
No, that's a great question. Tesla issued what's called an 8K in the securities filing world about a month ago. And it allowed us how it had about $11.6 billion of liquidity, trying to assure everybody we're fine, even though we're now seeing the coronavirus start to happen. But if you peel away the layers there's really, I think, only $6 billion of liquidity that it can burn through before it has to come back to the market. For example, they said we have $3 billion in credit lines, which they do, but $1.5 billion of that's in China. That won't do them any good here. And another $1 billion is for their warehouse line. Okay, so that's not really working capital at all. You have to go spend the money to borrow the money on that line. It's to support your leasing. So you now have only $500,000 of real credit capacity on their revolving loan agreement that they've had. And it's nice to have $500 million, but it's a lot less than $3 billion. The cash, yes, they finished the year with $6.3 billion. They raised capital again for another $2.3, so that's $8.6 billion of cash. but some of that is overseas and you can't bring it back. And some of that actually belongs to their so-called VIEs, or variable interest entities. And that adds up to, I don't know, approximately $1 billion or so. So that 11.6 billion shrinks to about 6 billion. Well, and then it shrinks to 8 billion. Tesla cannot let its cash balance go below 2 billion, I don't believe, without creating a serious risk that people will say, you're in big trouble. You face a reorganization danger here unless you get a bigger cash balance than that. That's just a reality for every company. Every automaker has its number. For Tesla, I think it's about 2 billion. So they really have $6 billion of running room, and you can burn through cash fast. My thought is, with the share price, I don't know what it is right now. It started the day at 500 or so, but Tesla needs to get its Q1 10Q out as soon as it can. So, and needs to go to market again and raise capital right now while it can, because it's always been able to. It's used convertible bonds. It's sold equity. I don't know that it's a great idea to do debt. We just saw like Carnival Cruise Lines try to raise money, and they did it with equity and with converts and with straight debt. And the equity tranche they had to cut back. They had to increase the coupon on the debt. It's a hard time to raise capital if you are a money-losing enterprise.
It is, but here's a question. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Aren't Tesla's total annual costs around $4 billion? Do you know
total
that?
Annual cost of what?
Cost of goods sold, SG&A.
Sure. Last year, its cost of revenues, was $20.5 billion.
Oh, 20.
That's just a COGS. That's before you get to the operating costs. Okay.
Okay.
Its total operating expenses were another. I don't want to get it wrong here. I'm looking at from the 10K. Its total operating costs were 4.1 billion.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking.
That's OpEx. Yeah. You were thinking of OpEx.
Yeah, OpEx. Okay. Yeah. So if they got $6 billion on hand, their OpEx is about $4 billion. They're good to go for over a year with zero income coming in. I think actually they're in a better
CapEx to do that.
Right. But I would maintain they may be in a better cash position than General Motors, Toyota, and Volkswagen, because of the big guys' cash burn is just that much more.
You're going to stop making cars?
They have. Everybody stopped making cars right now. And I tell you, as soon as I heard that GM was cutting salaries for everybody, that put my hair on fire, because that's a desperation move. GM and Ford and all the rest of them are drawing down every line of credit they've got. They're hoarding their cash. They're slashing everything.
Yeah. For this to go for the long haul.
Oh man, I mean,
a lot of Tesla's payroll is in cost of goods sold, not in OpEx. Okay, the factory workers, that's cost of goods sold. And are we going to fire your factory workers?
Well, no, but they're all laid off right now. Are they paying them? I'm sure that they told them all to apply for. Well, yeah, but my guess is those people are not going to find jobs that pay that well elsewhere for what they're doing. So my guess is you tell your employees, just like GM, Ford, Chrysler, go file for unemployment. And when times come back, we'll hire you back. And you'll lose some, but you'll get most of them back. I mean, I'm only speaking from the experience of this having happened in Detroit my whole lifetime.
Every 5 or 6 or 8 years.
We're in uncharted waters completely here. I've never seen an economic dislocation this severe. And you may be right. Maybe they'll just say, we're shutting down for a year. We'll see you next year.
I don't think they'll shut down for a year. They'll shut down for months until states, cities start to let people roam around and consumers.
There's a lot of specialized knowledge in a factory. The people that are there, it's not so easy to train and replace the good ones. And it's not so easy to hang on to of course, Tesla's a revolving door of executives. I guess in Tesla's case, you don't have to worry about that, but you better have a good core team that you hang on to, or you've got real problems. Your human capital is your most important capital.
Well, John, you've talked about the overcapacity that continues to exist on the planet, and maybe that overcapacity is going to be taken out.
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, what we've talked about, I think it was LMC Automotive said there's about 14 million units of overcapacity in China alone. That's something like 50 assembly plants worth of overcapacity. I don't think there's a whole lot of overcapacity left in the U.S. We cleaned most of that out back in 08 and 09. There is a lot of overcapacity in Europe as well. But I think you're right, Gary. I think this whole crisis is going to end up getting rid of a lot of that capacity. I think you're going to see a lot more M&A activity, mergers and acquisitions on the supplier side, but not right now, simply because, you guys saw the news that Borg-Warner is maybe not going to go through with the Delphi deal right now. But once this virus crisis is behind us, yeah, I think the big shakeout is going to hit like a ton of bricks.
John, just a question for you. Assuming I'm right that Tesla has made parts commitments, has agreed to buy a certain number of parts from its vendors, how do you shut that down? They got concessions and rebates, and now they've agreed to buy X number of parts. The people who are selling them the parts are going to want to collect for the parts, number one. Number two,
that's only if they're making the parts, and all the plants are shut down right now. If they're not making
parts come from Asia. A lot of Tesla's parts come from Asia. They're making parts.
Yeah. No, we've seen this in the past, Montana. I remember, most people will not remember this, back in the early 80s, Lincoln was buying diesel engines from BMW to put in the then Lincoln Mark 7. And all of a sudden, the oil crisis of the early 80s was over. Gas went cheap again. Ford could not give these things away. It had to write a check and just, pay it to BMW. But that's one automaker dealing with another automaker. The dynamic in the industry is suppliers, if you sue an automaker for breach of contract, boy, that's like, that's the kiss of death. You'll never get a contract in this industry again. So even though suppliers may have agreed and have legal agreements that they gave Tesla price breaks with the promise of future volume, if they really believe that Tesla is a going concern, my guess is they'll just eat that.
They'll work something out, right?
Or try to work something out, right?
Yeah, because the suppliers want the business, and they know that right now there's no business to be had. Consumers aren't going to showrooms. They're not buying online. In Tesla's case, plants are shut down, so inventory is not being built. Like, it's sort of a special situation. No one wants to go bankrupt. No one wants to lose a long-term customer, so they try to work it out so that that's how these things, avoid the kind of litigation, John, that you're talking about.
Yeah, this is not a Tesla thing, though. This is an industry thing that suppliers are dealing with OEs all the time. They're cutting them deals. The OEs are asking for givebacks every year. I mean, it's just common practice. So it's not Tesla specific by any
You have
stretch.
a few of your suppliers go out of business, and you got a problem too, don't you?
Oh yeah, no, you got a big problem then. But what is likely to happen is the ones that survive will go and pick up the pieces for pennies on the dollar. So I'm not trying to make light of it. It's a serious situation, but OEMs, the large OEMs, are always so bullish on how many cars they're going to sell, and they tell their suppliers, you got to tool up for this stuff. And I mean, it's not happening so much right now because so many suppliers have been weeded out of the business that the survivors will not take on business where they think they're going to lose money. And they hire the LMCs and the IHS markets and the Alex partners to do their own market analysis and say, okay, OEM XYZ is telling me they're going to sell 400,000 of these. What's your prediction of what they're going to sell? And they use that ammunition to go back in and negotiate with the automaker, because automakers think they're just going to sell everything that they've got. And many suppliers have been burned in the past over volume allocation.
I hear you. And I see that a first tier supplier can do that and hire those consultants and figure out what the market's more likely to be. But Tesla's dealing with a lot of second tier and third tier suppliers, and it has already stretched a lot of them out terribly. And it has a pretty I'm told by the people I know in Asia that it has a checkered reputation already. So we'll see where all that ends. But
hey, you're making a great point. I'm sure they made those volume commitments, and now certainly with the coronavirus, they're never going to do on that. I don't know if the contracts have a force majeure or an act of God clause or something like that they can argue their way out of. But your point still stands, because even if Tesla is legally able to extricate itself from these commitments, if their suppliers go belly up, Tesla's not going to be able to build cars.
So I don't think their suppliers supply only Tesla, though, right?
It depends. I mean, if they're the tier ones, no, they try to sell to everybody. But to Montana's point, if you're a tier 2 or even a 3 or 4, and guess what? You just miss one component on a car, a critical component. I'm not talking about, drink holders or sun visors or things like that. But if you've got just a chip or a diode or something you can't supply, guess what? The cars don't go down the line.
All right, so here's some news that just broke while the show has been on that sort of deals with what we're talking about here. General Motors and Honda have agreed to jointly develop 2 all-new electric vehicles for Honda based on GM's highly flexible global EV platform powered by proprietary Ultium batteries. The exteriors and interiors of the new EVs will be exclusively designed by Honda, and the platform will be engineered to support Honda's driving character. That just came out. So, wow. Montana, this goes to your point of more competition for Tesla.
Listen, I think Honda is a fantastic. Well, let me say, the first new car I ever bought was a Honda. What a great car. It's a great company. I bought my son a Honda when he graduated from college, and a little indulgent of me maybe, but it makes great sense for them to team up like that. The EV business is really tough. If you can share costs and make it work like that, that's a smart thing to do. But yes, that's formidable competition. And not everybody in Asia drinks Tesla Kool-Aid all day. Not everybody in Europe does either. There are going to be people who are attracted to that car. It's going to, again, put more downward pressure on Tesla margins when it starts to hit.
Yeah. To your point, why Ford and Volkswagen joined forces too. Same thing. If you could split the cost, you're a whole lot better off.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of Tesla bulls say somebody's going to come buy Tesla, just you wait. And it may be that that's a smart thing for some OEM to do, is buy Tesla, but not at $500 a share or $300 a share or $100 a share. It's not going to happen there.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, look, Tesla sold over 88,000 cars in the first quarter. That just came out.
Is that their number, or is that some analyst number?
No, that's their number.
That's a decent number. I mean, it's not as good as before, but that's not a bad number. Some were projecting a lot less than that.
They've been working hard to beat the number down for weeks now. The analysts originally were at 100,000 a few weeks ago, and Adam Jonas said, well, it's going to be lower, and Electric says it's going to be a lot lower, just so they could have a beat. And so that makes sense. So
it was significantly more than first quarter of last year, but is less than obviously fourth quarter was. But we know seasonality on cars, first quarter is always light, and you got coronavirus. So,
David, how do you think the revenues are going to compare with first quarter 2019 when they were selling high margin cars?
Yeah,
probably down like it was last quarter. But we'll see what they do with costs. I'm not going to predict their earnings. There are other people who get paid.
I'm just curious whether they'll be their earnings will be losses. I can write that down, but I'm curious to see what the revenue number is. But we won't know that till they publish their 8K, right. Which who knows?
Yeah. Hey, look, guys, this has been a fascinating discussion, but we're going to have to wrap it up here. Montana Skeptic, thanks so much for coming on the show. Very interesting conversation. Great to get your viewpoint on things.
My great pleasure. I thank you all.
And I hope you didn't think we were piling on you, so that wasn't the case.
The more the merrier, man. It's okay.
You defend yourself and your positions very well. And David Welch, great having you back on the show too.
Enjoyed it. In Montana, if you were I don't know, name a Tesla lover. If we had him on here instead of you, then I would have played devil's advocate with that guy too. So
my feelings were not for one moment hurt by any of this.
Real good, guys. And Gary, you and I will just keep on doing this.
Indeed we will. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks everybody for having tuned in.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.